Before we dive into this story full of mystery and suspense, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our exciting adventures. Turn on notifications to stay up to date and ensure you don't miss any unexpected twists. Now get ready for the start of an unforgettable journey. In a small town in Massachusetts in 1887 lived a 12-year-old boy named Thomas. The boy possessed a peculiar sensitivity, a sixth sense, perhaps, that allowed him to perceive things others did not see. He lived with his mother, Eleanor, in a simple but cozy house on the outskirts of a dense forest that seemed to hide mysteries from ancient times. The town itself was peaceful, but there was something in that forest that no one dared speak of, a secret everyone preferred to ignore. Thomas had always been an observant child. He noticed details that went unnoticed by adults, such as the way the trees seemed to move at night, as if they were whispering to each other. But what intrigued him most was his mother's behavior. Eleanor, a firm woman, but with a distant and melancholic gaze, never spoke about her family's past. She always avoided certain subjects, especially when it came to her late husband Henry, who had died under mysterious circumstances when Thomas was still very young. That autumn morning the sky was grey, heavy with dense clouds, and a light breeze made the dry leaves dance on the ground. Thomas stood on his porch, gazing out at the forest. The sound of the wind seemed more intense than usual. He knew something was about to happen, something that would change his life forever. He was interrupted by his mother's voice, calling him for breakfast. When Thomas entered the kitchen, he noticed she was paler than usual, and her eyes were watery, as if she had been crying without his knowledge. Eleanor was standing at the table, holding a letter in her hands. It was a letter that had arrived that morning with no return address, but bearing the stamp of an old acquaintance of her late husband. "Mom, what's going on?" Thomas asked, his curious gaze fixed on the letter. Eleanor looked at her son, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Thomas, this letter, it's about your father. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was afraid it would hurt you. You're not ready for this." Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. He already knew that his father's death hadn't been simple, but until that moment he had never had the courage to ask for details. His instinct told him that this letter was the key to unlocking what he had always felt was a dark secret in his family. "I already know there's something you're hiding from me, Mom. I feel it, I see it. That's why I want to know the truth, even if it's the hardest truth. I need to know what happened to my father." Thomas's mother sighed deeply and with trembling hands opened the letter. Her eyes began to scan the words inside, and the expression on her face slowly changed from fear to despair. "It's too late to hide this from you, Thomas," she said, her voice breaking. "The truth always finds a way to come out." At that moment, a sound coming from the forest surrounding the house interrupted them. A distant scream, as if someone were in agony. Eleanor froze, and Thomas ran to the window, looking outside. But the dense fog covering the forest prevented him from seeing anything clearly. Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, turned to her son. "The truth you've been searching for, it's out there, waiting for you. And now, Thomas, you can't run from it anymore." The tension in the air grew. What was hidden in that forest? And how was the truth about his father connected to that distant cry? Thomas knew that from that moment on, his life would never be the same. He had to discover what lay behind the mystery his mother had tried to hide. The weight of the truth was about to be revealed, and Thomas didn't know if he was ready to face it. "What do you think the scream in the forest means? Do you believe Thomas's mother has something to hide? Leave your comment and share your thoughts." The city of Massachusetts seemed to be asleep, as if awaiting the arrival of something that would awaken it from its long slumber. Thomas, however, felt a growing unease within himself. Something about that day seemed different, heavier, as if a storm were about to break loose, but he still couldn't understand exactly what was coming. After breakfast, Eleanor, who seemed more withdrawn than ever, sent Thomas outside to get some fresh air and clear his head, since he seemed so troubled. But distraction was impossible. The forest, so close to his house, seemed to call his name. Every step he took towards that mysterious place seemed like a step towards a truth he wasn't prepared to know. As he approached the edge of the forest, Thomas stopped. The sound of the wind and the rustling branches seemed louder, more intrusive. The trees, as if they had a life of their own, whispered something, but he couldn't understand it. Thomas sat on the trunk of a fallen tree and observed the surrounding scenery, trying to find something that would give him a clue about what was happening. It was then that he heard a voice, a soft yet firm voice that seemed to come from within the forest, but at the same time sounded as if it were inside his own mind. "Thomas," the voice whispered. The boy shuddered, unsure if the voice was real or a figment of his imagination. The voice continued, louder now, as if closer. "You are closer than you think. The truth awaits you, but you must prepare yourself. What you discover will change everything." Thomas stood up, startled, and looked around. There was no one there, only the trees and the dense fog that was beginning to cover the forest floor. He was alone, but the feeling that he wasn't was enough to make his heart race. He felt a cold hand on his shoulder, and turning quickly he almost fell in fright. It was a tall man, with worn clothes and a thick beard that seemed to have been shaped by time. The man was smiling, but his smile did not convey comfort. He seemed to know something that Thomas did not. "You're looking for answers, aren't you?" the man said, his voice deep and hoarse. "I know what you're looking for. But be careful. Some truths are more dangerous than you can imagine." Thomas, though still shaken by the experience with the voice in the forest, remained composed. "Who are you? And what do you know about my father?" The man looked at him with an enigmatic expression. "I am the one who knows the story of everyone who has passed through here. Your father, Henry, he knew what you are now beginning to understand. The truth is before you, but I cannot be the one to reveal it. His fate was already sealed when he got involved with that." Before Thomas could answer, the man slowly walked away, disappearing into the forest mist, like a shadow hiding within the shadows. The boy tried to follow him, but the man seemed to have vanished, as if he had never been there. He was more confused than ever. What did this man mean by that? How was it related to his father? And, most importantly, what exactly was he about to discover? Back at the house, Eleanor was even more distant, as if she were running away from something. Her eyes avoided Thomas's, and her voice trembled when she gave him any instructions. Something in her demeanor indicated that she knew more than she was willing to reveal. Thomas could no longer stand still. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. That voice, the mysterious man, and the secret surrounding his father were more connected than he had imagined. The only thing he knew for sure was that the truth was somewhere in that forest, waiting to be found. What do you think the voice in the forest meant by "the truth awaits you"? What might have happened to Thomas's father? Share your theory in the comments. The next morning, Thomas woke before dawn. His mind was a jumble of thoughts and questions. The conversation with the mysterious man in the forest still echoed in his head. Who was he? How did he know so much about his father? And most importantly, what did he mean by "his fate was already sealed" when he got involved with that? He couldn't ignore the feeling that something was about to happen. The city seemed quieter than ever, and the trees around the house stood imposingly, like sentinels watching everything. The boy felt that somehow he was being pulled toward a truth that could destroy everything he knew about his family. Thomas decided to return to the forest, no longer as an observer, but as someone determined to uncover the truth, however frightening it might be. He knew he couldn't do it alone, but no one, not even his mother, was willing to help him. She had even avoided looking at him in recent days, as if she were running from something bigger. The dense, cold forest seemed to breathe along with Thomas as he walked among the trunks and branches. He felt as if the trees were closing in around him, as if leading him to an inevitable fate. The sound of his footsteps on the wet earth was muffled by the thick mist that covered the ground, making the atmosphere even more somber. That's when he saw the little cabin. A cabin he had never noticed before, even though it was right in the middle of the path he always took to get to the forest. What was it? It had been there all along, hidden behind the trees, as if waiting for the right moment to be discovered. Thomas approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He hesitated before touching the old, creaking door, but something inside him compelled him to act. Without a second thought, he pushed the door open and went inside. The cabin was dark, except for the faint light that filtered through the cracks in the walls. Shadows danced on the walls, creating strange figures. The smell of mold and old wood hung in the air, and Thomas could almost feel the history ingrained in the walls of the small structure. But what caught his attention was the old chest in the corner of the room. It was a large chest with rusty latches and a thick layer of dust. Thomas approached the chest, his breathing becoming heavier as he got closer. What could be inside? Something in his instinct told him that this was the key to understanding the mystery surrounding him. He looked around, making sure no one was following him, before trying to open the chest. The key was in his jacket pocket, an old, rusty key he'd found at his mother's house, a key she'd never explained. With trembling hands, Thomas inserted the key into the lock, and with a click, the trunk opened. Inside, there was a set of yellowed papers and a hardcover book with inscriptions he didn't recognize. Upon picking up the book, he felt a wave of energy course through his body, as if the object were connected to something greater. The book was filled with notes, some in an ancient language, others in English, but all with a dark and menacing tone. Thomas flipped through the pages, his eyes fixed on the words that described ancient rituals and references to a curse that had haunted his family for generations. The words seemed to tell a story he had never heard, but somehow it felt familiar. When he reached the last page, his father's name was written there, along with a date, the day of his death. But the strangest thing of all was the description of what had happened that day. His father hadn't died accidentally, as he had always been told. The story he knew was a lie, a cover-up for something much darker. The truth was right before his eyes. His father had been involved in something terrible, something that had led him to make choices that now echoed through the generations. Thomas felt the weight of the revelation fall on his shoulders. The truth about his father not only shattered the image he had of him, but also left him with more questions than answers. He now knew that something much bigger was at stake, something that involved his family, the town, and perhaps even the forest that surrounded him. What do you think Thomas discovered in the chest? How could this change his family's history? Leave a comment and share your theory. The weight of the discovery still weighed on Thomas's shoulders as he returned home, the old book hidden beneath his shirt. With each step he took, he felt as if he were moving further from the life he knew and closer to an abyss filled with lies and mysteries he had never imagined. Upon reaching the entrance of the house, he hesitated. The silence of the residence seemed more oppressive than ever. The door was ajar, and inside, the shadow of his mother moved from side to side. She was waiting for something, or perhaps running from something. Thomas knew she had more secrets, more than she had ever dared to tell him. With a heavy heart, he went inside. "Mum?" His voice sounded low, uncertain, as if he were calling for someone beyond his reach. Eleanor stopped walking. Her eyes, which used to be cold and distant, were now filled with an inexplicable pain, a pain she clearly tried to hide. "You came back early, Thomas. What did you find out there?" Her voice was calm, but the tone she used was heavy with tension. Thomas didn't know where to begin. He held the book against his chest, but the words he wanted to say seemed stuck in his throat. "I found something about Dad, the truth you tried to hide from me." "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor swallowed hard, her pale face growing even darker. "Thomas, you don't understand. What you found isn't something you're ready to know. You can't carry this weight." Thomas stepped forward, his gaze fixed on his mother's. "No, Mom. I already know too much now. I know my father didn't die accidentally. He was involved in something dangerous. And you knew." "What happened to him? What did he do?" Eleanor began to tremble, her hands moving uncontrollably, as if trying to push away the fear that gripped her. She looked at the book in Thomas's hands, and for a moment her eyes gleamed with deep dread. "You can't understand, Thomas. This will destroy everything. You can't carry this alone." Before he could answer, the front door burst open, interrupting the tense moment between mother and son. A man entered, his imposing figure immediately filling the room. Thomas recognized him instantly. It was the local sheriff, a trusted man in the town who always seemed to have everything under control. But something was different that day. The sheriff's gaze was somber, and his demeanor anxious. "Eleanor," the sheriff said, his voice low and deep, "there's something we need to discuss. I came because we need to talk about what's going on. We can't hide it anymore." Eleanor looked at him with a terrified expression. "You can't. Not now. He already knows. He found out." "I know," the sheriff replied, his eyes now fixed on Thomas. "And that's why we need to stop. What your father did wasn't a mistake. It was a decision, and that decision will affect us all. The entire town is at risk." Thomas, still holding the book, looked at the sheriff. "What did my father do? What's going on? What are you all hiding?" The sheriff sighed heavily, as if he knew this moment would eventually come. He took a step forward, approaching Thomas. "You don't understand, kid. Your father wasn't just a victim. He made a choice, and that choice has consequences. Consequences that are about to reveal themselves." Eleanor closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as the sheriff walked away, a heavy silence hanging in the air. The boy was now at the center of a mystery that seemed to grow larger each day. His mother, the sheriff, and the entire town were involved in something he didn't yet fully understand. "I need to know more, Sheriff. What happened to my father? Why did he do what he did?" The sheriff hesitated, as if struggling with words. "The truth is far more complicated than you imagine. Your father was involved with forces we cannot control, forces that manipulate everything around us. The town, what happened to him? That's not something you can understand now, but the truth is out there somewhere, and it's more dangerous than you can imagine." Thomas, more confused and desperate than ever, felt the weight of the truth pressing against him. Each answer he received seemed only to raise more questions. And now he knew he was in the middle of something much bigger than anything he had imagined. The forest, the book, the sheriff. They all seemed like pieces of a puzzle that wasn't yet complete. But one thing was certain: Thomas could no longer turn back. What do you think the sheriff was trying to hide from Thomas? What happened to his father? Leave your comment and share your theories. The tension was palpable, and the weight of the truth was about to shatter the balance Thomas had tried to maintain. The conversation with the sheriff, while revealing in part, had only deepened the mysteries he desperately tried to understand. Nothing made sense. His mother seemed to fear something profound, and the sheriff, with his furtive behavior, wasn't helping. That night, when the city's silence seemed almost suffocating, Thomas decided to go to the forest again. He knew something was there, something that could finally put the pieces in place. His mind was teeming with questions, and the only way to find answers was to confront what was hidden in those trees. The night was darker than usual, and the fog, which always seemed a constant element, was now thicker, almost as if trying to hide what lay ahead. But Thomas didn't hesitate. He knew the forest held something he needed to discover, something that somehow was connected to his father. As he walked, the sound of his footsteps was muffled by the vegetation and the mist that enveloped everything around him. The silence was absolute, except for the occasional whisper of the wind that passed through the trees. Thomas felt as if he were being watched, but he was no longer afraid. He was determined to discover the truth, whatever the cost. That's when he saw her. The cabin, which last time had seemed like a simple refuge, was now illuminated. There was no logical explanation for it. The house was far from any light source, and the only light coming from inside seemed to emanate from a fire, but there were no visible flames. The cabin door was ajar, inviting him to enter. Thomas, his heart pounding, didn't hesitate. He stepped forward. Upon entering, the atmosphere felt colder than usual, as if the very air were laden with a dense energy. In the center of the room, there was a table with a lit candle, and around it several empty chairs. But what caught Thomas's attention most was the painting on the wall. It was an old painting of a woman with empty eyes, with an expression of eternal pain. Something about that painting made him feel a sense of recognition, as if he had seen that woman before, but couldn't place her. That's when he heard the voice, not the voice of the forest, but his mother's voice. "Thomas, you shouldn't be here." He turned, and there was Eleanor standing in the doorway of the cabin, her face pale and her eyes filled with indescribable terror. "Mother, what's happening? What are you hiding from me?" Thomas asked, his heart racing. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes fixed on her son. "I tried to protect you, Thomas. I tried to spare you what happened to your father, but the truth can no longer be ignored. I can't hide it anymore." Thomas's expression hardened. "What are you saying? What happened to my father?" Eleanor hesitated, as if struggling with something internal. Finally she spoke, her voice faltering. "Your father was involved in rituals. Rituals that were more than just ancient beliefs. They were called curses, but in truth they were manipulations of forces we couldn't control. He made a deal, Thomas, a deal that couldn't be undone." The boy felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't want to believe it, but his mother's words were too clear to ignore. He made a deal with whom? The answer came more slowly, as if she were trying to gather the courage to speak the truth. "With them. With forces beyond our comprehension, those who control destiny. The price was high, Thomas, very high, and now we are all paying for it." At that moment, the wind outside the cabin intensified, and a shadow formed at the door, extinguishing the candlelight. The figure that appeared in the doorway was familiar, but not human. Its eyes glowed a vibrant green, and its skin seemed to have a scaly texture. Thomas took a step back, his body in panic, but something compelled him not to flee. "He made a deal, and now the deal will be collected," the figure said in a grave voice, as if speaking from a distant place. "The time of darkness has arrived. The price for the truth will be your soul." Thomas felt the room spin. He could no longer distinguish what was real and what was part of the nightmare unfolding before him. All he knew was that the truth, now revealed, did not mean salvation. It brought with it condemnation. What do you think this mysterious figure represents? What should Thomas do now that he knows the truth? Share your theories in the comments. Thomas was paralyzed, his body responding more slowly than his mind. He stared at the figure now standing in the doorway of the cabin, its presence so immense it seemed to fill the entire space. The figure was neither human nor otherworldly. It was a manifestation of what his father had done, a representation of the agreement he himself had sealed and which was now being enforced. Eleanor, still in shock, tried to approach Thomas, but he quickly moved away. The feeling of betrayal he felt towards his mother, mixed with the terror that now dominated his vision, was suffocating. How could she have hidden this from him? How could she have allowed him to grow up without knowing the weight of the legacy he carried? "Mom!" Her voice faltered, anger mixed with pain. "You knew what was happening. You knew what Dad did, but you kept me away from all of this. Why?" Eleanor looked at him with sadness in her eyes, her face etched with inner struggle. "I tried, Thomas. I tried. But now there's no going back. Your father made choices that affected us all, and unfortunately you're the next victim." The fear in his mother's words made Thomas shudder. What did she mean by that? How could he be a victim of something he didn't yet fully understand? What would be the price he would pay? The figure, still standing in the doorway, stepped forward, interrupting Thomas's thoughts. His voice was deep, but with an ironic tone. "The price, Thomas, will be what matters most to you. There are no more choices. The deal is sealed, and the consequences are inevitable." The boy looked at the figure and then at his mother. She was defenseless, seemingly as trapped as he was in that nightmare. But what could he do? He didn't know how to fight against something so powerful, something his own father had brought upon them. How could someone as weak as him change fate? I don't know what to do," Thomas said, his voice low and trembling. "I can't change what my father did. I can't undo what happened, but I can fight. I can try to figure out how to stop all of this." Eleanor looked at him with a mixture of despair and understanding. "You have the strength, Thomas. You are stronger than you realize. But you need to understand, it's not just a battle against what's outside of you, but against what was passed down to you. What your father did isn't just a curse, it's a chain you now carry." The figure laughed, a low, deep sound that reverberated through the cabin, creating a sense of oppression in the air. "Courage, boy, is but a trickle in the ocean of consequences that follow. The truth you seek will not bring peace. It will open doors to something far darker." With each word the creature spoke, the feeling that all was lost grew stronger. Thomas felt as if he were about to drown in a storm of mysteries and revelations he wasn't prepared to face. But there was something inside him that refused to surrender. Something that told him he could at least try to fight. The figure then stepped back and dissolved into the darkness. There was no more sound, no movement. The fog that had once been thick around the cabin dissipated, as if it had never been there. Thomas and his mother were left alone, immersed in a deathly silence. Yet a sense of urgency grew within Thomas. He knew the real battle was only just beginning. He looked at his mother, who now seemed more tired than ever. "Mom, what should we do now? How can we change this?" Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to gather strength for one last fight. "Thomas, what you need to understand is that there's no changing what your father did, but you can fight against what it represents. The curse your father sealed isn't just about him, it's about all of us, but mostly about you. You have a power you haven't yet discovered, and the key to it lies in what he left behind. The book, everything you need, is there." Thomas's heart pounded in his chest. The book! It was the only thing he possessed now, the only piece that could help him understand what was happening and, perhaps, how to stop it. But something still bothered him. What did the figure mean when they spoke about the price? What would he be charged? He knew the journey was only beginning, and that the answers wouldn't be easy. What do you think the price Thomas will have to pay will be? What can he do to face what's to come? Share your theories in the comments. Dawn arrived silently, without the light that would normally ease the tension Thomas felt in his chest. Instead, darkness still hung over his soul, heavy and endless. His mother, visibly weary, spent her days locked in her room, yet another victim of the same burden Thomas now carried. She knew what was happening, but he needed to understand how to change his own destiny. The book lay on the table, its yellowed paper and worn pages seemingly weighing more than its contents. Each word he read plunged him deeper into a labyrinth of mysteries he didn't know how to solve. However, one thing was becoming increasingly clear to Thomas. He could no longer be a spectator in his own life. The truth lay before him, but he would need to find his own strength to face it. He closed the book tightly and looked at the horizon outside. The city seemed the same, but Thomas no longer felt like he belonged there. He was part of something much bigger, something that stretched beyond human comprehension. His father, with his choices, had charted a dangerous path, and now it was he who had to walk it. Thomas knew he had run out of time. He couldn't wait for answers from others, and he definitely couldn't wait for a magic solution. He would need to learn to fight what was happening, and the first thing he needed to do was understand the true power his father had sealed away, something that lay deep within those old pages. Determined, he stood up and went back into the forest, not to run away, but to confront what had always terrified him. He knew that once again the forest had something to show him. The fear that had once seemed like a cloak over his shoulders was now a challenge. He no longer wanted to be a slave to fear. He wanted to be the master of his own destiny. When he went back into the cabin, something had changed. It wasn't the cabin itself, but he himself. The fear that had previously made him hesitate had transformed into courage. He approached the table where the book still lay and began to leaf through it again, now with renewed focus. There was something there that he still hadn't fully understood. Suddenly, a passage caught his attention. The text was in a language he didn't recognize, but upon closer inspection, a strange sensation washed over him. It was as if he were reading something that was already inside him, something that was already part of his existence. The words began to form in his mind, and he realized he was beginning to understand what his father had done. The agreement his father had made wasn't just about the past. It was about the present, and about the key to his family's survival. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the discovery. He didn't know what the future held, but now he understood what he needed to do. He was ready to confront the forces his father had awakened, to right the wrong that had been done. He stood up with a new purpose. It wouldn't be easy, he knew that, but what was at stake wasn't just his life, but the fate of his mother and all those involved in the web of lies and curses his father had left behind. Thomas was no longer the boy lost in the middle of a story he didn't understand. He was the protagonist of his own story, and it was his turn to write the ending. The figure that had appeared in the cabin at the beginning, the mysterious figure that had challenged him, was still there, but not in physical form. Thomas felt its presence, but now, instead of fear, he felt a growing strength within himself. He had the truth. He had the key to reversing the course of his life. He looked at the horizon again. The sky, which had previously been heavy with dark clouds, now seemed clearer. He knew he had faced the greatest battle of all, the fight against his own insecurity, against the legacy that had been imposed upon him. He had found the power within himself, and now he was ready to fight whatever came next. What do you think Thomas learned in this chapter? How can he use this new power he discovered within himself? Leave your comment and share your ideas. The sun began to set, tinging the sky with a golden hue that contrasted with the darkness that still hung over the city. Thomas was in his room, the book now open before his eyes, but no longer with the air of mystery that had tormented him. He had read and reread it so many times that the words were etched into his mind, and the key to solving what he faced was becoming clearer and clearer. However, what he feared most was about to happen. He didn't know exactly how, but he knew that the truth he now carried could no longer be ignored. The figure, the being that had confronted him before, was about to return. Thomas felt in his skin that the time was coming, and with it, the moment to decide his fate. He looked out the window. The forest seemed peaceful, but a strange feeling hung in the air, as if the earth itself were waiting for something big, something that would change everything. He knew he would need to be prepared for what was coming, but how could he prepare for something he couldn't control? The preceding days had been marked by a heavy silence. His mother, still in shock, didn't speak much. She knew what was happening, but didn't seem to have the strength to fight. The city, which had previously seemed a place of comfort and familiarity, now appeared to be a prison. He felt trapped there, entangled in a web of lies that no one seemed willing or able to untangle. With the book in his hands, Thomas felt his last option was to find the answers his father had hidden. The final pages no longer spoke of curses or agreements, but of a hidden power, a key that could destroy everything that had been done. His father had made a mistake, but he knew he could correct it. He had the power to change things, but there was one thing he couldn't control: time. Time was running out, and he knew that if he didn't act soon, he would lose the chance to save his mother and himself. What his father had started needed to be finished, and he was the only one capable of doing it. He stood up with determination. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he could no longer postpone the confrontation. The book spoke of an ancient ritual, a ritual of power that could break the chains his father had created, but it also warned of the price that would be paid. Something would have to be sacrificed, something he wasn't yet ready to face, but he knew it would be inevitable. The forest was still there, but Thomas now saw in it a kind of path, a trail to follow to reach what he needed. He didn't know if he would succeed. He didn't know if he would emerge from this battle alive. But there was something in his heart, something within his being, that propelled him forward. He took a deep breath and picked up the book, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to concentrate. The preparation was simple, but the words written there made him feel like a prisoner of something greater. He looked once more at the forest and felt the presence of that which had challenged him. The figure was there, waiting. With one last glance at the house, he left the book on the table and stepped out into the darkness of the night. The city was quiet, but Thomas felt the pressure of the entire world on his shoulders. He needed to be strong now. He needed to be the man his father hadn't been. He was no longer running. He was going to meet his destiny without fear anymore. What do you think will happen to Thomas in the next stage? How can he use the power he discovered to face what's to come? Leave your theories in the comments. The forest was denser than ever. Thomas felt the weight of the night, the air heavy and laden with something undefined, yet profoundly familiar. He sensed he was nearing the end of his journey, but he also knew this would be the decisive moment. He had followed the path, but now, before his eyes, the real struggle was beginning. He entered the clearing where the mysterious figure had first confronted him. The night was almost silent, the wind now calm, but there was something unsettling in the air. The cabin where it had all begun was in ruins, covered in a thick layer of moss and dirt, as if forgotten by time. But something inside Thomas told him he shouldn't turn away. He knew that there, in that clearing, lay the turning point. The book he carried was now in his hands, its pages crumpled and worn, but still pulsing with an energy he was beginning to understand. He positioned himself in the center of the clearing, and suddenly the ground seemed to tremble. The figure appeared once more, but now in an even more imposing way. Its eyes shone like emeralds, and its presence was almost oppressive. Thomas did not back away. "You've come this far, Thomas," said the figure, in a voice that seemed to echo in the very earth. "But what you don't know is that the truth has a price. What your father started cannot be undone. What has been sealed cannot be broken." The tension increased. Thomas looked at the figure with anger and determination. "You're wrong. I know what my father did, and I know what I need to do to fix it. I'm not a toy of your forces. I can change this. I can break the cycle." The figure laughed, but it wasn't a scornful laugh. It was a laugh filled with profound sadness. "Do you think you can? That you can undo what's been done? What your father started was much more than a simple mistake. It was a mark on your soul. And you, son, carry that mark. There's no escaping it." The figure drew closer, and the mist around Thomas began to swirl, forming a menacing spiral. He could feel the pressure of those words, as if they were a physical weight on his body. But he refused to surrender. "I am not my father," Thomas said firmly. "I am me." And I will not allow this to destroy my life as well. If there is a price to be paid, let it be my life. But I will not let anyone else suffer because of this. I will break with the past. I will break this cycle of curse." With those words, something inside Thomas awakened. He felt a force he didn't know existed, an energy that came from something deeper than he could understand. The light around him began to intensify, the shadows dissipating as he prepared for the final confrontation. He didn't know exactly what would happen, but he knew he couldn't hesitate. The figure, now visibly furious, tried to advance, but before it could touch Thomas, an intense glow emanated from the book. The words written on the pages began to shimmer with a golden light, and a wave of energy coursed through Thomas's body, throwing the figure back. He felt as if he were being filled by something greater than himself, something ancient, something profound. "Now I understand," Thomas said, his voice strong and purposeful. "You told me that truth has a price, but you never said that truth also has power. What my father did was wrong, but I am the key to reversing it. I have the power to change the future." The figure looked at him, its eyes now filled with indescribable fury. "You can't. You have no control over this. This is bigger than you." But Thomas, now immersed in the golden light emanating from the book, did not recoil. He raised his hand, and the book shone even brighter. The figure tried to resist, but the energy flowing from Thomas was uncontrollable, a force he had never imagined he possessed. "I am not you," he said, his voice echoing through the clearing, "and I will not let what my father did destroy my life or anyone else's." With a scream, the figure was swallowed by the light, and before it could make another move, it dissolved, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. The air felt heavy for a moment, but soon a sense of peace began to fill the space. The tension, the fear, everything dissipated, leaving Thomas with a feeling of clarity. He looked at the book in his hands, now silent, devoid of the energy that had filled it moments before. He had won, not without sacrifices, not without pain, but he had overcome. What do you think will happen to Thomas now that he has defeated the mysterious figure? Has he finally broken the curse, or is there something more to come? Share your theories in the comments. The clearing was completely silent. The golden light that had once enveloped Thomas had now vanished, leaving only the tranquility of the night. The fear that had haunted him for so long now seemed a distant memory. The figure that had challenged him, the dark force he had so feared, was no longer there. What remained now was a lighter weight, as if the air had been purified, and he was finally free from the invisible chains that had bound him. Thomas felt an indescribable peace, but he also knew he had paid a great price. Not only his struggle against the figure, but the truth he had faced about his father, the legacy he carried, his mother's suffering. All of that had been destroyed in a single moment of decision. He didn't know exactly what had happened to the figure, but he knew it could no longer affect him. He had broken the cycle. He took a step forward, leaving the clearing and walking back towards the city. The night was calmer now, as if even the world around him had calmed down, recognizing that something important had changed. He didn't know exactly what the future held for him, but he was certain that he was now the master of his destiny. When he arrived home, he found his mother sitting in the living room, her eyes brimming with tears, but with a relieved expression on her face. She looked at him, and for a moment said nothing. Then, in a soft voice, she finally spoke. "You did what I couldn't do, Thomas. You were stronger than me. You broke the curse." Thomas approached, embracing her tightly. He felt, now more than ever, the importance of that connection, of that relationship. It wasn't just his own life he had saved, but also his mother's, and the lives of all those who were involved, directly or indirectly, in this cycle of suffering. "I didn't do this alone," he said, his voice firm. "I had help from something inside me, and you were always here, even without knowing how to help me. Now we are free from this. The cycle is over." They stood there in silence, peace finally settling between them. Thomas knew the battle had been far from easy. He had faced forces beyond comprehension, but the truth he now carried was powerful enough to dispel the shadows that hung over his life. And as he watched his mother, he felt the certainty that the future would be different. They had a new chance, a chance to start over. What do you think Thomas and his mother will do now, after battling the curse? What does the future hold for them? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story full of mysteries and plot twists, be sure to share your opinion in the comments below. What did you think of the ending? What were the most surprising moments for you? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one and turn on notifications so you don't miss any details. Until the next adventure.